For more on this, we are now joined in studio by political analyst Professor Kondlo. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. A very, very hectic day today.
Yes.
We saw the May Day main event in Bloemfontein, going through some chaotic scenes where the president eventually had to leave without addressing the people, the members who were there, and speeches were cancelled. Was it a political mistake to head into the situation? Was it not foreseen before it escalated to what it was today?
Lulu, it's difficult to say it was not foreseen totally, but I think they actually undermined the extent of divisions in the alliance, within alliance partners actually, around the whole issue about Mr. Zuma's leadership. Remember now, Lulu, what we see happening in South Africa is that a new and unique kind of populism is beginning to grow and is actually coalescing. And this populism is about opposition to Mr. Zuma's leadership. The problem is that the leaders who surround Mr. Zuma undermine the severity and the penetration of this new populism. I call it a new populism because it's uniting different political parties, different strands of political thought. You'll find that they all agree on one thing, that the leadership of the current president has failed us and we don't want him.
Now, Prof, why do you think the ANC executive decided to deploy President Zuma, as they said, that they deployed a member of the executive to go and address the main May Day celebrations, worker celebrations? Was it an oversight on their side, or was it just a decision that they took as an executive, especially after Cosatu has come out and called for President Zuma to step down?
Well, so far I get a sense that one side of the argument is that he was actually invited. He was invited by the leadership collective of Cosatu. And this has been the case several years. They always invite President Zuma, or the president of the ANC and the president of the country, to address the main May 1st rally. So one assumes that this was probably the case. But on the other hand, like I said, I think there's been a tendency to undermine the severity, the depth of the divisions within Cosatu itself, because it was very clear that the invitation and the sentiment about Mr. Zuma coming to address the May rally was not unanimous. There were deep divisions, but I think they undermined the extent of the divisions.
Now, let's speak about, the people, ANC supporters who were bussed in. We saw a reporter on the scene who spoke to ANC supporters who were bussed in wearing 100% Zuma T-shirts for the rally. Was it really needed, as this was a Cosatu event, and as you mentioned, that it was an invitation for the address, as per many years before, that an invitation is sent out and the ANC president addresses the May Day rally. So these 100% Zuma T-shirts, where do they come from? Because nobody seems to know exactly how those people ended up there. Nobody's coming out and stepping forward and saying, no, we made sure that they were there.
I think there might have been some anticipation that there could be a few people who are going to show no support for Mr. Zuma speaking at the rally. I think there must have been some expectation. But at the same time, remember, it's actually Ace Magashula's territory. And we know that Ace is a strong Zuma supporter, and he's unapologetic about that. And one suspects that it's some of his followers who wanted to show the public that in the Free State there is actually strong support for Mr. Zuma.
And we sort of saw where the Premier, Ace Magashule, as you mentioned, that he's a very strong President Zuma supporter, basically coming out and saying these were not people from within his province, because in his province the alliance is very strong, without saying much as to where these people are coming from. So sort of an indication that there would be some sort of probe or an investigation as to what exactly went wrong. What went wrong?
It would be interesting to see the direction and scope of that investigation. Yes, because, I mean, as a hosting premier, one still expects that, it's actually expected that a hosting premier would actually like to display strong show of support for the president coming to his province. Whether it's people who are bussed from outside the province, well, we really don't know. Let the investigation happen, and then we'll see what actually happened.
Now, just moving away from the main event, which was in Bloemfontein, there was also heckling of the chairperson of the ANC, Baleka Mbete, who is the Speaker of Parliament in Durban, and then in Polokwane, in Limpopo, Jesse Duarte, the Deputy SG, was also heckled. You know, we've seen opposition to the presidency, and they are seen to be very strong President Zuma supporters. What is this indicating? What should we be reading into these now? Because it's not only in Bloemfontein, it's Limpopo, it's KZN, and these are leadership members of the African National Congress.
Yes, it's actually bringing us back to the point I raised, that there is growing popular opposition to Mr. Zuma's leadership and his cabal and his team. And the problem is that at the moment you find that, in my view, ANC leaders still undermine the depth and the level of penetration and the popularity of this opposition. And I don't think it was really coincidental that it happened the way it did. There is growing critique, and there is a loud voice which is growing every day, that the leadership of the president of the country, president of the ANC, is responsible for some of the challenges the country is facing. It's responsible for the deep divisions that you find in black communities. It's responsible ultimately even for the downgrade which has hit South Africa currently. So this is the kind of debate, this is the kind of, some would say it's a negative narrative, but it's becoming popular and it's becoming widespread.
Now, Prof, let's just go back a couple of to the elections that we had, where the ANC lost some of the big metros, which was Johannesburg, Tshwane, and so on. There was a lot of reaction to that, and there was a lot of talk of the middle class having been the people mainly who did not vote or who voted for the opposition. This standing up, or the workers now heckling ANC leaders and ensuring that they are not addressed by ANC leaders who are invited to May Day celebrations for the workers. Is this an indication to show that actually the people who were not expected or who may have voted for the opposition could have been the workers themselves, not only the middle class who was sort of used as a scapegoat?
Yes, Lulu, but I don't think we should read too much into this, because from my analysis and in my view, I think what has happened has actually displayed the gap which exists between the leadership collective of Cosatu and the mass base of the organization. Because the leadership collective of Cosatu seems to have some kind of understanding and diplomacy in dealing with the ANC and the ANC leadership. And it is actually sending sometimes confusing signals because at one point they made a very strong call that President Zuma should step down. The next minute, you see the president of Cosatu in Mr. Zuma's party. And the next minute, you see Mr. Zuma invited to address the Cosatu rally. You see, whether those tactical shifts on the part of the leadership of Cosatu actually filtered down to workers on the ground, it's really not clear, but I doubt it did. Because the leadership says this, but the mass base of the organization itself is holding a different position. So I wouldn't read a lot into this, but it does show that the alliance is not united at all. That the alliance is actually divided first at the level of ideology, because there are a lot of ideological issues which were not clarified by the ANC and its alliance ever since it was unbanned in 1990. In fact, ideological debates predating the unbanning of the ANC. These issues are still there, and they have not been addressed, and they are not being tackled. And secondly, there are challenges of a liberal democracy leading a liberal democracy. And unfortunately, after Mr. Mbeki, Mr. Zuma has completely failed as a leader in a liberal democracy. And I've said this, and there's a lot of evidence to back it up. Whether he's failing himself or he has weak advisory team, but he has completely failed leading a liberal democracy.
Now, Prof, just looking at today's reaction from the workers themselves, could this possibly change the response of President Jacob Zuma and the team that he has around him? Could this change what's happening to South Africa today? Could it make them re-look at their stance and do things differently?
I don't think Mr. Zuma will be changed by anything, I can tell you. And people should not be excited by the heckling and all what is happening in the marches. Nothing is going to change Mr. Zuma, because in my view, I think the president has his eyes set on one thing. First, completing his term as president. Secondly, handing the baton to a person who he believes in. And I think these are very two critical things. Because if he hands the baton of leadership of the ANC and eventually leadership of the country, it means he'll be able to retire peacefully. That is very important for him. It's part of his exit strategy. And secondly, Mr. Zuma is a very interesting leader. Interesting in the sense that, listen, Lulu. Firstly, Mr. Zuma is very courageous. He doesn't fear anything. Whether there could be marches left, right, and center, Mr. Zuma cannot be intimidated, that I can tell you. Secondly, he's a kind of leader who's very unique in the sense that he has no sense of shame. If you think you're going to embarrass him, or if you think you can make him feel so embarrassed, well, you're making a big mistake. So he combines two rare qualities: courage and no sense of shame. So I don't think he'll change his minds because of what is happening, yes. But I still think the ANC itself is going to find a way to spin doctor, to explain what has happened, to rationalize it so that the ANC membership understands it.
Now, you touched on something very key there, Prof, when you mentioned the fact that President Zuma should look at handing the baton to somebody that he trusts and believes in, and that he feels that the country will do the same, the nation as a whole. Who do you think that person would be?
Well, it's not a difficult one, but the impression so far give us some indication that really he would love to hand the baton to Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. I mean, that's what is all over the media. And that's what many analysts would actually tell you, yes. And I also think the indications are that he would like to hand the baton to Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma.
Would she be an acceptable candidate for the nation?
I would say at one level, acceptable. Because when you talk about Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, you're talking of a very brilliant, capable person. I'm sure many South Africans would actually agree on that. But at a second level, there's going to be a level of serious difficulties that he's going to confront. When I talk about difficulties, first is the ANC itself. It doesn't matter, Lulu, who's going to win actually the ANC contest for presidency. That person is going to inherit a very divided ANC. And that person will also inherit a declining ANC at the polls in 2019.
Now, Prof, very quickly before we wrap up, you know, looking at the ANC has basically come out and blamed the alliance leaders for early pronouncements on leadership, preferences as the main reason for President Zuma being prevented from addressing the people at the rally today. Could this be the reason? Could this be the main issue? The fact that you know, people have come out and pronounced, and you know, looking at the ANC Youth League in the Free State, for instance, who have come out and pronounced that they would be rallying behind Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, and you know, making pronouncements on leadership.
Yes, that's partially and it's superficially satisfying, that kind of analysis. But I would say it's ultimately sterile, because if you look at the alliance itself, the dynamics within the alliance, the very fact that the alliance itself, when they talk about the National Democratic Revolution in the first place, you'll find that the interpretations of the National Democratic Revolution within the alliance itself are actually different. There are liberal interpretations of the National Democratic Revolution, and at the same time there are what I would call radical interpretations of the NDR based on the SACP thesis of 1962. So they don't read from the same page, and these things actually have a cumulative effect on the relationships that occur amongst alliance partners themselves. So it's not just pronouncement. That is a very superficial analysis. Things go very deep than they superficially appear.
And just looking at SACP leader Blade Nzimande saying this was a big wake-up call without really explaining that statement. What's your take on that?
Yes, he's probably correct to say it's a big wake-up call. It's probably correct. And if I was a leader who has conscience, I would really sit back and think, when I see the working class in numbers so divided, when I'm invited to come and speak as the president of the ruling party and as the president of the country, I would really sit back and reflect. But unfortunately, we don't have such character in President Jacob Zuma. It's a serious wake-up call, because this appeared on popular news, television all over the country, and it's creating impressions amongst the people of South Africa. It's creating impressions even amongst grassroots members of the ANC in the branches. People are going to start questioning whether really should we continue to toe the line we are being bought and convinced to toe, that we should support the Zuma faction, even in the next ANC elections. So this thing is actually a serious wake-up call, you see. Actually, what Dr. Nzimande means is that ANC leaders need to think deeply, they need to reflect more.
Prof, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for joining us. That was political analyst Professor Kondlo joining us in studio.